Hi, everybody. My name is James Glover. Welcome to day 2 of AFMX. I am thrilled that you have chosen to join us. I am here with Joey Spillane. He just has completed the most wonderful documentary about our American military called Kilroy and the Boy Soldier. Joey, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I want to go into some detail and some depth on the story that you've crafted here, but I want to just sort of jump into things. Give me just a little bit of an overview of the project and how you got involved with it.
Yeah, it started with you can actually kind of see the beginning of the project in the beginning of the film. That old footage of Kennedy talking to his father while his father's, pretty much passing away. He promised his dad that he'd tell his dad's story. I think he learned the hard way that making a film isn't as easy as you think. So it took a while to get going. There's some other people involved before me. But finally, me and him met, and it just worked out perfectly. He's a great guy. We worked good together, and we were able to finally get it finished after quite a few years of him trying to get it done.
As is the nature with a lot of documentaries, they take a long time to develop.
Yeah, you think you'll be in and out of production and within a year, and it's not like that at all.
It's a long year.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that statistically speaking, I think 95% of all documentaries that are shot never get edited, and
Yeah.
of them, how many actually get finished? So
Yeah.
congratulations to you on the accomplishment.
Thanks.
So I want to kind of just jump in with that intro. What a gut punch way to start the film. Heavy and a lot of gravity in that scene. Um, can you kind of talk about starting the film there and how you sort of had that story progress as it went through the remainder?
Yeah, so when it's like I said, started off as a story about his dad, which is an insane story. Lying about your age, going to World War II at you're 14, and he was there at the beaches of Normandy. I mean, he was one of those guys that we see in all these movies and all these stories that have been told about that. And doing that at 14 is insane. I mean, if we think about what we're typically doing at 14, you're in high school, playing video games, whatever, and one, it was is a good beginning, because that is where this story starts. And I just wanted to start people off there and let them know, kind of um, where the things like that can have you end up. And there's a lot of people in America today that have gone through that type of stuff. And same reason why I chose to put in some of that pretty graphic war footage before we really get too far into things. I mean, that's all in the first act, because this film's about what happens after war, but the audience needs to see what war is like before they can understand where the rest of the story's heading.
And I think that was brilliant. I was going to wait a little bit later, but I think it may be a good time to ask this now. You did quite a bit of recreations, and as the story was unfolding, can you give me some of the idea of the process of creating those, and of the process of how to, I don't know, sort of do those scenes justice, as it were?
Yeah, well, obviously there's no real way of doing it justice. And then, but it was more of sometimes when you're working with limited resources, as most films are made today,
Yeah.
the decision's kind of made for you. And you just basically have to do the best you can. And, Kennedy signed off on everything. So if there was anything that he felt wasn't sticking true to his father's story, he definitely would have said something. But his whole family has seen it. They all love it, and said that it was, we did the most accurate portrayal that we could of what it was like in those times.
I'm just a little bit curious, a little inside baseball into your experience with completing Kennedy's father's story. What was that experience like, working with somebody and telling such a personal and intimate sort of I don't know, sort of retelling of an experience that he had been working his life to articulate or to accurately represent.
Yeah, it was actually I loved it. I mean, how many times can you you basically I helped fulfill this promise. Um, so I couldn't be happier about it. And then the fact that he liked it was a bonus, and me and him are you know we're BFFs now. So I still I see him all the time. We've been friends for several years now. I don't think either of us um, thought that this would happen when we first when we first met each other. But yeah, he's a like I said, we're BFFs now. So
Yeah, you'll definitely find friendship in an experience like that. I
uh-huh.
can only imagine how deeply moving that must have been for him and his family to sort of have that sort of level of closure or completion on you know their father's request or his father's request. I
Mm,
kind of want to I kind of want to build on what you just said there though, because you talked about finding a friend in the process, and it seems like as you progress through the story, that's sort of a tying theme with the other guys that you interviewed, is it's that difficulty to connect. So I'm curious, how were you able to find the other subjects in the film, and I don't know if it's an accurate way to say this, but convince them to be part of the process or open up to you.
yeah. So the first one that I did there's several interviews with tons of people. Um, these were the ones that ended up, you know, being in the finished film. The first one that I met was Rob. He was a school friend of one of Kennedy's friends, and he was like, "Hey, I know this guy. He's perfect for this film because not only is he a veteran, but he's got a PhD in psychology, and he can basically he was basically like brought on to be the expert. He is an expert. Don't let my air quotes like, but he became. I did that because he became so much more than that. Me and Rob, I went there. It's always weird at first, I guess, when you meet someone. But there wasn't really weird or anything, I guess. But I remember I walked in. He has the coolest house of all time, and somehow within the first few seconds of us meeting, he found out that I played guitar. Um, he was like, "Oh, come here, I want to show you something." And he has this room full of vintage Gibsons and all sorts of it was tons of amps, a particular amp that I'd always wanted to play, um, and I mean, yeah, we just played guitar and stuff, and I tried all these different guitars, and we became pretty much fast friends, and he introduced us to Butterman, and I think that Rob kind of vouched for me. We didn't have a huge crew; it was pretty much just me. So I think a lot of people would have been more apprehensive if they're talking to a whole film crew versus it was just me and the camera was there, but it was more of just a conversation between me and them. I wouldn't say I was really even interviewing them. We were just talking. Um, and the craziest story, I guess, of all is Paul was just some guy that Kennedy met at the gym and was like, I don't know, he saw that he was a veteran, um, and they're talking in the gym locker room, and he said, "Oh, hey, do you want to come down and be a part of this project?" And Paul, who's a super laid back guy, was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come down and talk to you guys." He had no idea what we were doing, so he was pretty pretty blown away by the final. When he saw it premiered at a festival here in Colorado, and he was like, "I had no idea that this is what we were doing when I agreed to do this." And he's seeing
Yeah.
it, seeing all that up on the big screen. So
That's pretty wild. So it really was an organic sort of developing
absolutely, yeah,
storyline.
yeah. No, I'm the most planned person, I guess. It just all worked out. Um, I don't want to say luck, but I guess I don't know what else to put it on.
No, I think I mean I'm a firm believer in just about everything in our lives is luck, and so you know it's you make a plan, throw it out the window, and hope for the best. So
Yeah, yeah, that's basically what I did. Like 75 different outlines for this, and none of them even come close to what the the
yeah,
finished product ended up being. So,
you're on outline 76.
yep, that was the
No,
lucky one.
it's great, and it really I as I was watching it, I started to think in my mind, oh, he's going to wrap it up here. And then the story keeps developing in such a wonderful, like, sort of surprise along the way as you get from act 1 to act 2 to act 3 of the film. And you obviously, like, you rely on the expertise, the firsthand account of these guys to sort of pull you through the story. But it tells such a complete picture as best an hour and a half long documentary can. And I, as a viewer, not having had combat experience, genuinely appreciated getting to sort of see that. Um, can you kind of talk about the process of sort of crafting that depth of story?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm the most planned person. So I did, I there was obviously a ton of planning involved, where basically using Kennedy's dad's story as the skeleton, and each different chapter kind of in story his story was a segment. He wrote, the memoir that's talked about in the documentary. Um, there's I took that part of it and made it connect more broadly to all of these other guys who, it's weird, they all kind of have the same experience. And all throughout all the interviews I did, I found that all, I was hearing the same story more or less over and over again. And it really struck me kind of like the hero, Joseph Campbell's, hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of following that as well, and wrapping it all up in the sense that even though, these guys all had, and there's that kind of getting into that climax, I guess, like the third act, where they're all telling the worst, or one of the worst things that happened to them. And at the same time, it coincides with the worst thing that Kennedy's father went through, and ending with they all find their own way of continuing through it, and that's what we all have to do. I mean, you guys did it with your festival. I mean, it's much different thing, but like as an example, everybody got hit with this COVID thing. Your only option was to quit or find a way through it. And I think, the documentary is a big advocate for not quitting. And as Paul's saying, "Get the fuck up," kind of became the mantra of the film. And I mean, I say it to myself several times a day now. I think about that. So
Yeah, it's interesting how that sort of works its way into your psyche, because you see the adversity that we face in our own lives, and it's no less real for us, but it certainly, in comparison to some of the experiences that these guys have gone through, you start to run out of excuses not to meet the expectations that you set forth for yourself early on.
yeah,
And it really, I the the more things change, the more they stay the same with their stories and their experiences. As you were saying, it really, what I found so fascinating is that they started out the story about the very factual, matter of fact, here's what happened, here's where I was, here's how things went, I was in a firefight with XYZ, whatever. But they wrapped up their stories with the humanity and compassion that they felt, that sense of community that they felt, and that they didn't find when they got back home.
mm-hmm.
Can you kind of talk about sort of the experience of like of trying to work out that sort of dichotomy of something that they have such reverence for and a horrifying experience, and then coming back and trying to find a happy medium?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the virtual reality segment came in, which I was just blown away by the fact that they're using that to go back to that, to feel that brotherhood and that camaraderie. One of the first things Rob said to me was, and it's in the film too, is it's not, they don't have the problem adjusting to coming back. Everyone else has a problem adjusting to them, and it's insanely true. I think that we've in America maybe got a little spoiled and maybe lost our way a little bit, and these guys never, because of what they've gone through, that's just never going to be the case. You're never going to see, you're never going to see a combat veteran complaining and making a, you know, making a scene in a store about something small. I know I get yelled at all the time. I'm an appliance repairman, so I get yelled at all the time, you know, and it's hard to, some of the things I heard that these guys saw, it it just changes your paradigm, you know. It's hard. Imagine, you know, your friend got blown up and you got to take a shower to wash their blood off of you, and then all of a sudden the drain is clogged with pieces of their flesh. You know, that was a story that someone told me that happened to them. And then some people complain about, I don't know, getting the wrong order or something, you know, like,
Oh yeah.
so you gotta understand that's why they're like, what, are you serious, you know? So I can see why they sometimes get a little, you know, distraught with some of the things they're seeing around here, which is what they all said. They all said the same, completely independent of each other. You know, said that same exact thing in the film.
I am curious how you sort of, I'm curious about how you found the doctor who did talk about the therapies and the virtual reality and the things that were available. I'm curious how you found that doctor, and sort of how that helped shape how you crafted the story too.
Yeah, I just Googled, you know, I had heard about the virtual reality thing, and it just happened to be that she was here in Denver, and uh, called her. She was willing to meet. She was another person who didn't really know what she was getting into. She was also very surprised when she saw the final piece of the film, because again, it's, these people agree to do this, and it's just me with the camera. So I think she literally thought she was helping, you know, some kid with his school project. And then, yeah, when she finally saw the end of it, she was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know you were making an actual movie here." And it was that was, I know it seems like it sticks out in the film a little. I mean, it doesn't seem like it sticks out, but when I'm explaining it to people and I'm like, oh yeah, and there's this virtual reality thing, they're like, wait, where does that come from? But you can see how it actually fits in the film with people go there. Like I said, they're going into they so much don't get that feeling of camaraderie here, that it's gone to the ridiculous point of using this virtual reality therapy, which is a great, it works. It's a great form of therapy, but you know, if we were just better people, then that wouldn't even need to exist. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how that I decided to put that in there.
No, and I think that it was great that you did, because it gave a different sort of perspective on the state of things, because while it's not prescriptive in these guys, you know, sort of, you know, retelling their stories or their lived experiences, there are people that are deeply concerned with solving, you know, PTSD related problems, and finding, I don't know, creative or inventive ways to help. And I don't think that the virtual reality therapy is any different than what the purpose that the film serves.
Mm-hmm.
If I could, I mean, I realize that, you know, we're making a film versus people that are doing heroic work to try to help people. But I think that it's all part of the greater conversation. So I'm glad that you included it uh, in the film. And it's interesting because uh, your expert, your PhD holding expert in psychology, gave the prescription for it in as you got sort of near the back end of the film, was to just stop sending these guys over there, you know. And
Yeah.
can you? I'm curious about that particular point in the film, that where he got to that point in how he was discussing it with you. Can you sort of, I don't know, can you sort of speak to that moment a little more in depth?
Where he says, "Stop sending our men and women to war, and you won't deal with it anymore."
Yeah.
Um, I uh, like I said, these were less interviews and more us just hanging out, talking, and it being
Yeah.
filmed. Um, but I don't think that was something that I provoked out of him. That was an idea that he's had. Rob is a literal genius, so uh, he's right about everything that he says in there. All those guys, by the way, basically said what Rob said. Almost every. Well, I mean, when you who does want to send people to war?
Right.
No,
Yeah, of course, of course.
no one.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but Rob was the oldest of the veterans. I talked to a bunch of World War II veterans as well, but Rob was the one that said it as best as it could be said, and yeah, no, I don't think anybody will disagree on that.
No, I think it was it's interesting when Rob was talking, because he speaks with such gravitas that you don't. I feel like he could say
He
just about
gave he
anything and
gave
you're
me
gonna believe him.
perfect cutaways every time. Like it was just yeah. It's
No,
fun.
he's
It's
a
funny
great.
because I've actually never made a documentary before. I always
Oh
made
wow.
Yeah. This was my first documentary. I always made narrative films, and I was after working with these guys, I can't work with actors anymore because these guys were just so naturally perfect. You spend weeks with an actor hoping to get them, 20% of just Rob hanging out in his kitchen. So
Yeah. No, it was that really kudos to you as a first time documentarian, like that. It
oh,
really
thanks.
translated well in the film, that these it was a conversation. It wasn't some canned interview or something that, you were just having them recite what you wanted them to say. It came across as infinitely genuine. I guess now's as good a time as any. I'm curious about sort of your background as a filmmaker, but more so the experience as a filmmaker that you brought into the beginning to the end of this film. Oops, sorry. Uh, what was your personal growth and your personal journey as you made your way through this?
Yeah, it was night and day, from when I started to when I finished. When when I started, I was still in film school, which I only lasted one semester there. But that is how I met Kennedy. He came and met me at the film school, and I think I was so naive and just I was making a film that I did finish, and it went on and did good for what it was, and did the festival circuit and everything. And I was like, well, it's only a matter of time before I'm making the next James Bond here, and obviously that never happened, and I my whole perspective on everything changed. Not even, I mean, obviously these guys had an effect on it, not because of their experience with combat or who they, it had nothing to do with the military, just who they were as people. They were just awesome people. I learned a lot. I still learn a lot from Kennedy, from Rob. Every day when I'm tired and I don't want to go train or anything, I think about Paul and his Get the Fuck Up, and I go. Butterman was just the nicest guy ever. You know, we had some fun with that motorcycle shot in the drone, and you know, he's just like the cool. I made him not like he was probably. I'm sure he enjoyed it himself riding his motorcycle through the volcano park, but you know, just had him do it like 400 times, and he never complained, and they were all just so cool. And I just kind of figured that making films is not about being. I mean, if we Hollywood is, I mean, good. You couldn't even pay me now to be a part of that. It's what it's become. It sucks, but this idea of the golden age of cinema, that when you're young and you're in film school and you want to live on Mulholland Drive and you just want to sit around and talk about David Lynch films with everyone all day and stuff, it's just, I guess I've just been humbled by the whole thing. And now I like just me and my camera talking to people genuinely, doing things that I'm interested in, and finishing things, because I meet a lot of those people that are still like that, and they never finish anything, but I finish everything that I start, and I'm definitely proud of that. So
I think that that's one heck of a mentality to bring in to documentary filmmaking. I gotta ask, what switching from narrative to documentaries, uh, now that you have it in hindsight, what's some advice that you could give to a first time documentary filmmaker?
yeah, so I don't think I'm in any place to give advice, I guess. But one thing I can tell you is that there's no difference between traditional narrative, and documentary. Is what I learned. You're telling a story, no matter what. So all the same pieces are there. They're just put there differently, and you got to dig a little bit deeper to find them in a documentary when you're sifting through hours and hours and hours and hours of conversation and stuff. But it's actually the easiest transition. You know, you'd think that it would be this weird, I don't know what to do, but if you can't make a documentary, then you can't make a narrative film either, you know, and vice versa. So you're either a filmmaker or you're not. So you should be able to tell a story no matter what pieces you're given.
I really love
And
that. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
just
Keep going.
finish what you start. The best the worst something is better than the best nothing, you know. So I've had people, you know, they'll be like, yeah, I'm working on this whatever, you know, thing, and that your documentary is nice, but it's not really like my. I'm like, well, okay, well, I might, you know, you can watch my documentary, but you know, you've been telling me about this thing you've been doing for like years now, and I don't see it. So
No, well stated. I think that, yeah, that's you know, like I had mentioned in the beginning, like 95% of the documentaries that get shot never get finished, and it really is. It's a Herculean task to finish a documentary because you end up with so much good stuff. I mean, like you said, you had tons of conversations that obviously couldn't be included, otherwise your documentary would be 10 hours long. But yeah, that's great advice. I think that finishing what you start's great advice, no matter if you're a filmmaker or not. But
yeah.
yeah, that's and it's quite an accomplishment, and the film is wonderful, man. I really appreciate the fact that you made it, and I appreciate that you've shared it with us, and I appreciate that you've been here to discuss it with me.
Yeah, same to you guys. I appreciate your festival accepting our film. It's super awesome because, you know, I know how hard these things are, and I also know that it probably wasn't easy getting hit with. It's not been easy for anyone getting hit with COVID, but I really appreciate that you guys, instead of giving up, found a way, you know, to keep the festival going. Not even just for my film, but just for film and art in general. So thanks to you guys, and thanks for having me.
Well, on behalf of AFMX, like, it is my pleasure to you know, we appreciate it very much. So film is important, and documentaries like yours are important, and it's important that people have an opportunity to see them and hear the voices of these artists. So in the final, we got a couple minutes left. Do you want to thank anybody and, nice little sign off?
Yeah, obviously, I just want to thank Kennedy, because if it wasn't for him, none of this would have ever happened. Thank Kennedy's dad and their whole family. They've been very gracious to me, and I can't thank them enough. And then Rob and Stephen Butterman and Paul, all those guys. Like I said, if it wasn't for them being willing to share their stories, then we wouldn't have anything. So everyone that helped make the film, I'm forever in your debt.
Amazing. Well, we definitely appreciate you joining us, Joey. My name is James Glover. On behalf of all of us here at AFMX, we appreciate you joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the festival. Thanks, everybody.